Today on the RPG Goblin, we are going to be talking about Mork Borg. Now, this is a very, very interesting game that is described as Rules-Lite and heavy everything else. It is a grimdark dungeon crawler, and the way this game was created is absolutely genius. So, if you're curious about exactly what Mork Borg is, please listen to this episode. I brought on Zakariah to talk all about Mork Borg, and he just is in love with this game. I did end up making this topic a two-parter. In this first part, we cover what Mork Borg is and talk about mechanics. In the second part, we talk about the character creation and actually go through with making a character within Mork Borg. So, with that out of the way, let's continue this episode and let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the RPG Goblin. I am your host, Willow, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about Mork Borg, which, if you don't know what Mork Borg is, well, listen to this episode because I'm not quite sure how to explain it to you yet in very simple terms. But it is dark metal, TTRPG, and super easy to pick up, all of that. So that's a little rundown of what Mork Borg is before we start. But today, we are joined by a guest named Zakariah. Would you like to give yourself an introduction? What do you do, and what's your experience with Mork Borg?
Hi, I'm Zakariah. I've been DMing for a few years, chronically DM in various games. I have a lot of different games that I've tried over the years, and Mork Borg is probably, if it isn't my favorite tabletop RPG I've run into, it is definitely one of my favorites, for sure. It's definitely one of at least the top two. It's super fun, really fast-paced, really hackable. Like, you can do a lot to make the game your own, because it comes with a very simple basic gameplay loop. And it makes it really easy to make your own if you choose to do so, or you can just run it straight out of the book as it is. There's like hours and hours and hours of enjoyment to be had in the world of Mork Borg.
We love that so much. It's always great when you get a game that's like, it just gives you all of the tools, and then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah,
pretty much any game, but like there's specific ones that do.
Yeah, it's like it's like well, technically I could piece apart any game system, but like some of them are definitely more like I guess like hack friendly than others. It's like it's one of the reasons why 5e D&D is so like prolific in the space, is largely because it's so like customizable, right? Like that's one of the things that makes it so popular, where there are other games that I could mention that are like really fun, but are a lot harder to change anything without this like long rippling effect of consequences, where you change this one rule and it means that now you need to change another rule, and now you need to change another rule, which I guess is kind of true for 5e, but it depends. I guess it depends on what you're changing, like how fundamental the gameplay element you're changing is, and maybe I'll talk about that later on when we get to talking about Mork Borg, because I think Mork Borg is much more customizable, but that's also because it has a smaller like rule set to start off with, so you can add to it rather than having to swap out or adjust elements and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess first kind of question, is it Mork Borg or Mork Borg?
So I hear people say it both ways. Personally, I don't care, but if you actually look in the book, there is a pronunciation guide for it on like the first couple pages or something, where it says like pronunciation is Mork Borg. It's Swedish. It means dark fort. And yeah, it's pronounced Murkborg, Mork Borg. Okay. At least that's the So that's the way that they would pronounce it. But I think most people miss that little footnote on page 2 of the book. But I guess that's what the O with the like the umlaut over it makes the O into a U sound.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah, that's good to clarify. I don't want to say it wrong the entire time and be like, oh no.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Also, like everybody that I play with says Mork Borg.
It's also kind of fun to say it like that, Mork Borg.
Yeah, it is. It is 100%. So like I don't have like I don't particularly care either way. I was gonna say it's a made up word, but it isn't. It's just Swedish. So
It's just a different
sorry,
language.
sorry, Sweden. It's a made up word. Yeah, no, it's Dark Fort, which is really fun to me because there is actually an even simpler version of Mork Borg called Dark Fort. That is a tabletop RPG. It's on like how many pages is it? It is like 3 pages long for
That's
all
great.
of the rules of the game, and
Oh,
it came out in 2018, and it's like a feature of the Mork Borg cult Ferritory,
mhm.
which is like a supplemental book that you can buy for Mork Borg, and it's just kind of slipped into the middle of it. They have like this full like
Cool.
mini RPG called Dark Fort that is like the like original prototype that they expanded into Mork Borg.
Oh, that's awesome that they have that for you to try. Oh, that's so cool. Oh man, I love TTRPGs. But I think the now that we have the whole pronunciation stuff out of the way, I think we're gonna start with the most basic question of what is the best way that you would describe what Mork Borg is?
Mork Borg is a grimdark fantasy tabletop game that is rules light and heavy everything else. I think that there's like one review that said something along those lines about the game, and I think it does describe it most aptly. That the game itself is similar. I would say it's very similar if you've played any old school recreation games, like any OSR games. It's similar in the like size of the rule set to an OSR game and appeals to a lot of the same audience as OSR games. It's even sometimes put in that category, but I personally wouldn't call it an OSR game because it isn't trying to recreate anything. It's very much trying to do something that's its own thing, like a new light RPG, but with the benefits of hindsight.
That's a
What
very interesting way to describe it. I like that. Yeah.
what I mean most of about that is like if you look at something like, oh gosh, what are some names of OSR games? There's
The
like
Old School Essentials one?
Old School Essentials. There's the Black Hack and the White Hack,
Oh yeah, yeah,
two
yeah.
different ones that are like old school recreations. The White Box, I think, is another one that is like supposed to emulate like the White Box D&D. I might be misremembering some of these names. I know that like Lamentations of the Flame Princess is a weird fantasy OSR game as well. But all of them, what they all have in common for OSR games is that they're all trying to like recapture either basic D&D or advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Like they're
So like the
trying
real old school.
yeah, they're trying to either recreate or emulate the way that those games feel. I even think that Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is another
Oh yeah.
game on yeah, like Dungeon Crawl Classics is another game that it isn't like a proper OSR because it's not like recreating the rules of old school games, but it is very much trying to recreate the feeling of playing old school games.
Mhm.
Where it's like Dungeon Crawl Classics has like additional dice, like they use the D30 and they use all these other additional dice. Like I think they have a D3 in their dice set as well. They have all these weird dice and stuff, and it's supposed to make the game almost supposed to make it clunkier, to
Mhm.
make it feel more like you're learning the game as you're playing it constantly, which is what it feels like when you first start playing, right? It's like, what are all of these math rocks? What is up with all of these rules? And Dungeon Crawl Classics is like, how about more rules and more dice?
How would I stress you out just a little bit more?
Yeah. And it's like, and that is a fun experience in and of itself, but they're trying to like emulate the feeling of an old school game without like recreating the rules outright. Where like a lot of these games are trying to recreate the actual rules or like a modern update to these old rules to play basic D&D. Mork Borg isn't doing that deliberately. It's just a rules light game. And what I mean by that is that they don't have, and it's probably my favorite part of Mork Borg, is that it doesn't have the cruft of tabletop tradition holding it down. To say, like, we have 6 ability scores in most games. We have, we have strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and that has, and variations of those or things that are very, very similar. But we usually will have in like most D20 or Dungeons and Dragons-esque games, they'll be emulating those, and OSR games love to emulate those. But why do we have 6 stats? Like, what is the reason? Is mostly tradition. Like, we've had those stats. Because, I mean, there have been lengthy arguments for decades, right? About, like, what is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? Where is the line? And, like, there's lots of people who are like, oh, I know definitively the answer is this. And it's like, I mean, sure, maybe that works at your table, but I'm sure that you can find a niche scenario where those two things kind of blur. And what is the difference between, like, charisma and wisdom in some scenarios? And, like, if you're very, very smart, is that not charismatic depending upon the scenario? Like context matters so much about these things that it's like, why do we have to have these 6 ability scores when more and more over time we see that, like, functionally the intelligence stats all are just like one stat, right? Like, most of the time when you build a character in like 5e, and I'm going to use 5e as a comparison because it's one that I think a lot of people know. Often. Yeah, I think it's one that a lot of people know.
Yeah, it's the easiest touchstone.
And I'm gonna be honest. I like 5e. I know that there's a lot of people that are like turning away from it or disliking it, or they have had their taste soured for it over the years. But I do very much like D&D 5e. So none of this is a bash against it. I think it's done what it's done very, very well. But if you look at that game, you can see this trend over time of really you only need one of the like special stats, one of the like lower 3 stats of intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Like, you build your character with one of those and you can just dump the rest. And usually that's fine because, like, you need your casting stat, and that's going to be the one that you put the big number on, and everything else, whatever.
Who cares?
And in Mork Borg, they have 4 stats. They have strength, they have agility, we have what is the equivalent to like constitution, which they call toughness, and there is presence. And presence is a fill-in for that casting stat, where you're basically like, presence would be what you would test for like perception. If you're like, oh, how aware are you of your surroundings? You could also roll presence in order to aim like a crossbow or something of that sort, because that's like aim. So it's sort of your awareness of the world around you and your presence within the world. It's also what you would use to cast spells.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of simplifies it because, I mean, other than like using the lower 3 stats like intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, like those are usually either used as personality, like you put a little bit of points just to feel like your character can have personality, or using it as a magic stat. There isn't really other points to those. Just kind of almost combining them into one stat. I'm not saying like, that's the comparison directly to Mork Borg, but almost combining it into just one stat that covers magic overall, I feel like makes it so much more easy and also just simplifies it.
Yeah, there's something very, very satisfying about the fact that, like, oh, if I need to be like good at spellcasting, I only need to do this one thing. And I don't have to worry about that, like, ruining my skill checks down the road. Yeah. Because there is, to be fair, like, almost a running joke amongst the folks that play Mork Borg that Mork Borg characters have no intelligence, and that's a feature, not a bug.
I love that.
So, I mean, but also to be fair, like, I mean, how often do player characters really have, like, great intelligence?
Other than for it to be specifically to cast magic.
Yeah,
like, really.
Yeah. Like, I mean, intelligence is probably the most dumped stat in 5e unless you're playing as a wizard, or maybe like an artificer if you're playing with artificers. But like generally it's a stat that comes up in niche scenarios in order to pass skill checks. And I, as a forever dungeon master, find myself trying to find ways to use ability checks that are more niche, and it becomes like homework of like, how can I implement an intelligence check into this scenario? And I have to consider the fact that like, oh, my player characters probably can't make a very high intelligence check, like just because it's so often a dumped stat. So these are things that when you're like building your game, you're gonna have to like think about. Where in Mork Borg, I don't have to think about it as much, but that's also because they don't have skill proficiencies. So I don't have to think about those things either of like, is this an investigation check, or is this is it perception, or is it investigation? Is it intelligence or is it wisdom? I can be just like roll presence, and if you roll a high number, we move on.
Yeah, it just keeps it, and I think like you said, like it's a fast-paced game. It keeps it so that it can just feel that way. And
Yeah, it makes
sets
it
its
move.
vibe.
Yeah, it
Exactly.
certainly does. It keeps the game moving, because at the end of the day, whether you're adding a bunch of numbers to your rolls or you're adding a couple of small modifiers to your rolls, at the end of the day, we're rolling a d20, and if you roll high, you succeed. And if you roll low, you fail. And that is like the basic gameplay loop that Mork Borg does really, really well. And having played a good chunk of Mork Borg, not just like one shots, but actually running like a campaign in it, I can say like it does that astonishingly well. The math in Mork Borg, how simple it is really good. I don't know if there's any like math people in your audience that would really like to look at the like the arithmetic of Mork Borg and break it down, but it's very good, and it's also very simple, which is a combination that I very much appreciate, because
That's
like,
insanely interesting.
well, because like if you take like D&D 5e and you consider things like proficiency bonuses, and the way that rolls to hit scale over time, you'll actually find out that the math is actually quite ingenious. The way that proficiency bonuses are calculated and the way that they scale with bounded accuracy is actually kind of ingenious. But I can't say it's simple. Like trying to like, I can't tell you, because I'm not a huge math person. I do appreciate it, but I can't like keep things in my head, so I'd have to write it down. But I can say that like I did a breakdown of like, what is proficiency bonus and how did they come up with it, and I sort of reverse engineered proficiency, and I was like, this is really clever, and the way that they put this together is very cool. But it does make the game more, it makes it more complicated, not more complicated per se, but it makes it more numbers in your head as you level. Which means that as you play the game more, the game slows down. Like if you've ever played in a high level game, you know that those combats just will take longer.
And you gotta add your modifier, and
yeah, part of it is the number of abilities that you have, but part of it is also just all the numbers are bigger now, and it just takes more people longer to do the math.
Yeah, and sometimes there are people that just do not want to deal with that. And that's why Rules-Lite games are actually usually a great solution to that.
Yeah, like lower numbers make the game go faster. And Mork Borg doesn't have proficiency bonuses. It does have some bonuses, but they all stay pretty small. They all stay well below 10. Most things are only like +1, +2, stuff like that. And most of that gets written down on your sheet, so then it's just one number. Like your like we'll probably get into it later, but like when you make characters, ultimately your character sheet doesn't keep the ability score. It throws that away. It just keeps the modifier.
Oh yeah.
So like your plus to hit or minus to hit, because minuses are also a big part of Mork Borg. So like whether you have a +1 or a -1 to your strength, like that's all you have on your sheet. You have a +1 or you have a -1.
You don't have like a big number that like, this is why you have that.
Yeah, you don't go, oh, well, I have a -1. I have, a 9 strength, so I have a -1, but I have proficiency, so that's 3 because I'm level 5, so I actually have a +2 to this thing that would be -1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's none of that. Like, it's just I have a -1, and when I roll the d20, I -1.
Yeah, super easy, super quick. Love that.
Yeah.
Ah, I love that so much. And
Like,
so, what would you say? Like, what would you say to someone? Almost to like, how do you almost? I don't want to say warn people, but how do you like tell them what to expect from this game?
so I will tell people because it does have a certain style to it, right?
Yeah,
Like the
for sure.
game does seem really intense, but I think that the things that I have to like tell people to really like to make a player want to play this game, which is the way I'm going to frame my answer that way. I don't know if that's the way
Yeah.
that you intended the
Oh, yeah,
question.
definitely, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, but like if I was to pitch this to someone, the things that I would say like are most important is that you shouldn't be making like characters that you are too in love with.
Mhm.
But yeah, don't be in love with your characters. Like just make like a basic character. Don't like go too deep into their like backstories beyond like a couple of paragraph, like a paragraph, right? Like
Mhm.
that should be enough. And also, characters are a lot. This is the thing that I think is like actually a good pitch. I should have started with this. Characters in Merkborg are a lot more resilient than you think they are.
Mhm.
Because they have 2 hit points does not mean they will die in like 5 sessions.
Mhm.
The thing about playing Merkborg is it is an exercise in not fighting fair, in thinking creatively, and in running away. Because there are things in this game like okay, if you make a character and your character has 4 hit points in Merkborg, if you hit 0, if you hit -1, you're dead.
Mhm.
Like you're just flat out dead. There are no death saving throws, nothing. So you're like, okay, well, how do I live? And the answer is armor.
Mhm.
Like in real life, it actually reduces damage.
Mhm.
So even if you have 5 hit points, if the monster deals a d6 of damage, your armor will reduce that damage by a d4.
Mhm.
So like those numbers change, but like for example, so like if a dragon decides to bite you, like a wyvern bites you, and it does like a d6 of damage, and it rolls a 3, and you have armor, and you roll a 2, you just took 1 damage from this bite.
Mhm.
So with that type of system, which also moves really quickly, but it keeps the numbers very small. It means that you aren't taking like 2d6 damage, or you're not taking 5d10s of damage. Like
Yeah.
your 5 hit points are enough for you to take at least a couple of hits, provided that you have armor. And if you don't have armor, run away. Like run away and attack things from far away.
Uh-huh.
Hide from your enemies. If it seems like it's a fair fight, you shouldn't be taking that fight. You need to take things on that are easily winnable. Or you need to use your overpowered exploits that you can find in this game to instantly kill things. I think that there is an ability on one of the optional classes that I think speaks very well to the tone of Merkborg, is that there is a dagger. It's a poison dagger. And
Mhm.
when you stab something, you roll your d4 for damage. And if you roll a 1, the enemy dies.
Just straight up.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how big of an enemy, how small of an enemy, like they're dead. Like
Oh,
you
that's so
killed
cool.
like I actually ran a conversion of a piece of Tomb of Annihilation. I converted into Merkborg, and I ran
Ooh.
like the Yuan-Ti dungeon that's in it. And at
Oh,
the end
that
of
sounds
it,
so cool.
there's like Raz Nasi, like this Yuan-Ti king or whatever. And one of my players ran up and stabbed him and rolled a 1, and he instantly dies. And that was one of the most memorable things about that run to me, was that like, oh, they just saved this for this time and they got lucky. And this boss monster just instantly kicks the bucket. Like 30 hit points doesn't matter. You're
Mhm.
dead.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my god.
And so while it might seem like, oh, there are things that can instantly kill your Mork Borg character, like one of the characters in one of my games, he crawled into a hole to investigate what was inside of it, and he just instantly died
Really?
because, yeah, he like fell into like a lightning trap or something. But while there are things that can kill you, usually it's a die roll, right? Like it's not just like, oh, you're just instantly dead, but it's like roll this die, and if it hits these numbers, then you're dead. But also, like, you can kill the monsters just as fast. And I think that in Mork Borg, by default, the game world itself, which I'll touch on, like how I feel about the basic like world of Mork Borg in a bit, maybe if I remember. The world itself encourages you to not want to continue living too long. Let me actually flip open this book here that I have in front of me. There is in the book the calendar of Necrobell, which is essentially in the world of Mork Borg, the world is ending like imminently. And you can decide as a group when you start playing the game how quickly the world will end. Because the world of Mork Borg is grimdark, and in a way that is truly grimdark. The world is a terrible place to live, and everything sucks. Like all of the time.
The
Your
perfect kind of
character.
game to play.
Well, this is like.
Oh no, I love it. I love it.
I'm gonna go on a tangent about grimdark. This is like something. If I had a soapbox, I would stand on top of it and declare this. Most things that say that they're grimdark aren't actually grimdark, and it kind of irritates me when people use that like term all over the place of like anything that's kind of moody people describe as grimdark, and it's like grimdark is like a specific genre that has its origins in Warhammer 40k. That's where the term comes from, because 40k has like the prologue of in the grimdark year of 40,000. So like that's where it comes from. That's what it's talking about. And the beauty of Warhammer 40k is that everybody is terrible and everybody sucks. All of them. Every side, every faction of this game is bad. So you get the pleasure of playing the bad guy when you're playing that game. And
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but also what it means is, and this is I think more important, is that in the tradition of like tabletop gaming, like back to like war games, there is something a little bit weird about playing a war game where you're playing like a Civil War battlefield and you're manning, like there's someone manning both armies, right? Like there's real world uncomfortable things about that scenario. So Warhammer avoids that entirely by saying in this fantasy world, everybody is evil and sucks. So if they lose, that's fine. We don't have to care. We can just focus on the fun parts of war without focusing on like any broader implications of it.
Yeah, the tactics and all of that.
Yeah, you get to enjoy like, oh, I just blasted 100 of your troops, right? Like I just murdered 100 people. And it's like, yeah, but they're like space Nazis. So like, it doesn't matter. So like we don't care. And it's like, oh, well, the other side won. Well, in that case, literal demons from hell are being massacred and we don't care because they're literal demons from hell.
Everyone sucks.
Yeah, everyone sucks. Like the orcs suck, the demons suck, the humans suck, everybody is terrible. And it means that you get to just enjoy the other things. It's almost like watching horror movies where people can enjoy the viscera of a horror movie more sometimes when the characters are especially disposable, right? Like it's why, you know, people who really enjoy movies that are more graphic, they can indulge in that without having to really like feel moral repercussions for enjoying what they're watching when the characters aren't real people. They're just caricatures, right? Like they're just these abstract dumb people. Then you can enjoy the Final Destination movie or whatever you're watching.
Whatever it may be.
Yeah, but you can't enjoy that if you actually like characterize your people as like people with like emotions and like like actually fully fledged people. You have
Mhm.
to like, if you're like, oh, but they're like the worst people ever, then you can enjoy the fact that like they're dying en masse. But that is like what grimdark is. And so when
Mhm.
people say like, oh, this this fantasy game I run is grimdark, I'm like, it really isn't, like most of the time,
Mhm.
because you have characters that want to make the world better, and in a grimdark world nobody wants to save it because it's too far gone. Everybody is selfish and they're just looking to live another day and do the most selfish thing that they can in
That's
order
a
to
great
survive.
way of like describing it. I am obsessed.
And I think that a grim dark world, if you have a good character in a grim dark world, that character will die a meaningless death very quickly,
Mhm.
and the world will continue to be a terrible place. There is a place in fantasy, and it's a place that I like very much, which is just dark fantasy, which is where the world is kind of shitty and it's like sloping towards grimdark, but it hasn't gotten there, and you're like on the cusp. And that creates this environment where you can have heroes that want to challenge the evil, like the evil that is imposing itself on the world.
Mhm.
Right? Like I like that. That is personally my favorite type of genre because I do like some elements of grimdark, but I can say grimdark storytelling, it doesn't leave itself open to character growth,
Mhm.
because your character can't grow because they're going to die soon because the world is terrible because
Mhm.
the world is ending in 4 days, and even if they did a good thing once, they will be punished for it, like inevitably, because they will fall into a pit of spikes. A troll will tear them apart. Like there will be no good endings. There will be no happy endings in Mork Borg.
Yeah, and I guess that can make it a difficult game to sell to people,
Yeah,
especially when a lot of people usually are in love with their characters, want to write backstories and want to role play and stuff like
mm-hmm.
that. What is
100%.
what is the intention in the audience for Morkborg?
So in Mork Borg, if you're building a character for Mork Borg, you can enjoy the fun like dungeon antics of
Mhm.
like a fast-paced like dungeon game without having to worry about your character,
Mhm.
because your character sucks. And if you build them right, they should be a terrible person. And
Mhm.
then you can throw them meat grinder style into a dungeon, watch them get eviscerated, and then make a new character really quick and send them into the same dungeon.
Absolutely,
Like,
and I guess it gives that opportunity for people to also just play a selfish character and not feel
yeah,
bad about it.
yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, character like wants to like anything that your character wants to do, like if it is self-serving, like let them attempt it.
Mhm.
Let them try to just steal from somebody random. That is perfectly valid in the world of Merkborg. It's like, oh, I meet a wandering merchant and I would like to take them for all that they have. I want to steal all their shit. Like,
Mhm.
I want to murder them and take their stuff is a valid option, as valid as anything. Um, but also, like, that might incite somebody to come back for revenge. Because, like, I mean, there are
Mhm.
still people in this world, right? And then you're just being hunted down and you will die quickly. Like you will you
Consequences.
yeah, there are still consequences to your actions, and you might want to do things that are, tactically smart. Like, I'm not going to rob the merchant because I want, to continue to live. I don't want anyone coming to kill me for murdering them willy-nilly.
Mhm.
But if your character is a bad person and they are a person who like kills and steals this merchant's stuff, and then they run off to a dungeon to escape their bounty. That is like a really good premise for a Merkborg scenario where you
Mhm.
find yourself like in this dungeon trying to like hide away from the pursuing authorities. And that just drives you to go further and further into the dungeon as
Oh,
you're being
that's so
pursued.
cool.
Like, that is a fantastic premise to a Merkborg scenario where, like, oh, and now you're in a dungeon, and it's like a dungeon, and you can't go back
Mhm.
because you'll get arrested and executed. But if you keep going forward, you will inevitably die. But you, as the player, you don't have to worry about it because your character is objectively an awful person. So like
You can
if
just
they
have
die,
fun.
yeah, you can just have fun playing the game, a part of the game, without
Uh-huh.
having to worry about like, oh, what if my character dies? It's like it took you 4 minutes to make this character and they're an asshole. So like let them die, like it's fine, and then you can just roll up another person who's entered the dungeon. But as long as you don't like make a good person, you can enjoy it. But let's assume that your thief that like is wandering into this dungeon, like they managed to survive 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and then they fall down a staircase and they break their leg. They still survived, but now you have a broken leg. That sucks. Oh no, you ate something in the dungeon that was poisoned and all of your teeth fall out. That's awful. A thing that could probably happen. And it's like, oh, that sucks, but you're still going. That's fine.
Mhm.
You get into a fight with a goblin. The goblin attacks you, and it has like a curse that means that you'll turn into a goblin in 3 days unless you kill it, and it just runs away. So now you're chasing down this goblin with your one leg, hobbling along, trying to kill this goblin before you succumb to the curse. And on the way there, the world ends.
Oh my God. It is truly just stacking one terrible thing on top of another thing until
Yeah, it's
just
hilarious.
ultimate destruction.
I think that is something that is like really cool about this game, is that like it is funny.
Uh-huh.
Once you get past the like constant depressing like veneer of the setting, it gets really really funny just how unyieldingly depressing it is,
Mhm.
because it never stops.
Oh
Everything
my
is
God.
awful. And so you have to be, and this is back to like why you need to make a character that is a bad person, because they are going to suffer. And it would
Mhm.
be very saddening to have a good person suffer through this world. But
Mhm.
the premise of it is that all of the good people are already gone. So the only people left are shitty, and we can enjoy all of the awful things that go down. And yeah, you can have moments of levity and stuff, but it's really not a world that lends itself to character growth, because it's going to end badly anyway. So
Mhm.
enjoy being the villain, being a bad guy, putting yourself into a scenario where a bad person is in a bad place at the wrong time, and
And what
be
happens?
okay. Yeah, and be okay with that going poorly. And like it can be a lot of fun just to do that, because you just get to embrace the madness of it, the chaos of it a little bit.
Mhm. That is so insanely cool. Oh my God. Again, now I want to play it even more. Like I've had it on my shelf and I'm like, oh, I'll look through it. But like that just completely sold me on it. It's kind of funny to think of because TTRPGs are like, role-playing games and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But to enjoy a game for like almost strictly mechanics and how the game actually functions is amazing to me. That is amazing.
Yeah, and the system is so tight, man. Like the game itself is just so well optimized. I can't stop raving about it, and I've told everybody that. And that's actually why I think that's why Kat ended up telling you like, hey, like, do you want to talk to Zach about this game because he really likes it? Is because I will proselytize Mork Borg to anyone who will listen. I have bought 5 or 6 copies of this game now just to
Oh
give to
wow.
people.
Oh,
Uh,
that's amazing.
because I'm just like, I think that like you're like into tabletop things, and like you will benefit from at least flipping through this book.
Yeah,
Like,
just to experience it.
like please look through it and look at some of the ideas in it. And even if you don't play it because it's not like your vibe, there's so many good parts to this system that I think is worth emulating in other games. But I can say that like the setting is really good for the rules that they provided, but you don't have to play in the setting. If you would like to play a game that isn't so grimdark, like you could hack the game super easily and make it like change out the world. And that's what
Mhm.
I've done in one of my games, is I've changed out the world itself, because grimdark is a hell of a lot of fun for a few sessions, but personally it will tire me out. Like I will get tired of it. And I'm like, I would like to have an arc for one of these characters. But the world of Mork Borg just doesn't lend itself to that. So I would recommend if you are somebody who wanted to play in the system of Mork Borg, but without the setting of Mork Borg, like you can definitely like homebrew your own setting for it. And the rules themselves are really well done and will serve basically whatever purpose you're trying to fulfill for them.
Absolutely. Oh man, that I think is one of the best sells that I've ever had for a game. I'm just I'm still reeling about it. But yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, you talked about, how it can be exhausting over a few sessions. Do you play Mork Borg in more of like a one shot, like each session's individual, or do you do any form of like long-term play, whether it be like, oh, I'm just gonna have like a 5 session game of it,
I
or
generally the games of Mork Borg that I've played have run, I would say like about 3 sessions would be about
Mhm.
the average. I've played some one shots, and one shots with Mork Borg are awesome because they can be set up so quickly. Like on the fly, I brought Mork Borg on vacation once, and we just played in the hotel room, like me and a few
So cool.
friends. Because like I mean, it's just like I need the book and like a few pieces of scratch paper. I had brought character sheets from Mork Borg, which are available on their website for free to like download and print. They also have print-friendly versions of their character sheets because they have like a color ink version and like a black and white version that's printer-friendly, and I really appreciate that. Um, but essentially, you could play Mork Borg without even the book if you're just a little bit familiar with the rules as the person running it, and
Mhm.
it is there are few enough rules that you could feasibly just like remember all of them and move on. Like I'm sure at this point I remember all of the rules of Mork Borg, but like yeah, you just need a few pieces of scratch paper and you can just pen and paper RPG this and and,
Absolutely.
and play the game whenever, wherever. But yeah, it's a game that I play. Well, like I really, really wanted to play a long form game in it, and I've played like some games that were like a handful of sessions, or maybe like 6 sessions long. But I would say anything longer, anything that you intend to be longer than like 3 or 4 sessions, you might want to do some adjustment. If you're like me and you like narratively driven games, you might want to do some adjustments on the world to better suit more of a dark fantasy setting rather than the grim dark setting that Mork Borg is set in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because like running a long form game, like if you're running a set, games for months and months, I think that would be. It's almost like too much of a whirlwind. That like
Mhm.
Mork Borg can be so much fun and it's so fast paced, but like playing it in the setting that it's in can be just such a whirlwind that I'm like, I need chill moments in between the constant carnage. I need a break every now and again, and pensive moments, and like moments to reflect on things. I enjoy those in
Mhm.
games. And Mork Borg is like, we don't have time. We have 4 days. We're gonna roll the dice and see if the world ends every single day if we make another step towards the end. Yeah. Also, like how yeah. So it can be a lot if you're trying to run something super long form. Is what I
Mhm.
I would say, at least for me. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
for me, I'm like, if I was running something that was like, oh, we're gonna do a year-long campaign in Mork Borg, I'd be like, okay, that's gonna be like a lot of like stuff happening because it's like, oh, on day 3 the sandstorm comes by and it like kills the whole party, and now we have to start anew, and it's like
Yeah, it would
um
definitely not be the same people by the end.
yeah, it wouldn't be. I don't know what consistent narrative you could have outside of like you would have to take something that is sort of a meat grinder scenario itself and
Mhm.
just go with that. Like something kind of like, I think, like Tomb of Horrors from like AD&D, something like that, where it's like this is a
Mhm.
dungeon that thousands of adventurers flock to steal the riches of it, and it's like that's your campaign. But
Mhm.
that's kind of it, though. Is like it's gonna be a game about going into this dungeon and landing on a bunch of traps for 30 sessions. I don't know if I have the bandwidth for that, but I think if you're running a game that is kind of like a beer and pretzels type of game where like you're all like it's a bit of a party vibe and y'all
Having
are like
fun.
yeah, like you're
Like, obviously people are having fun, but like just like casual almost.
yeah, if it's just like a casual game of like yeah, like we don't really invest in our characters or anything like that. We're just doing it for a good time and I enjoy watching somebody trip down a flight of steps into a pit trap. And if you want to do that for a bunch of sessions, that I think Mork Borg is a really good fit for that particular type of like, oh my god, you just got impaled again.
But if you want any sort of character driven anything,
I think that that's just hard to do in Grimdark, and I think that is kind of it's kind of antithetical to Grimdark, which is why I think a lot of to continue my rant on Grimdark, it's why a lot of things, while they like to market themselves as Grimdark, really don't want to be Grimdark. Because like if you are a grimdark setting, you have essentially cut off a lot of narrative potential just by the exerted pressures of the world on your characters. You have cut them off from any type of growth or progression or making the world a better place, because the nature of grimdark is that it's hopeless, and it's very hard to put a real character with actual aspirations and plans for the future into a grimdark world, because it's not going to turn out okay. There's too many things stacked against you.
It's not what it's made for.
Yeah, and it's like Grimdark wasn't built for that. It was built for constant carnage all the time with no repercussions. like
That's
we don't
what I want.
yeah, and sometimes that's what I want out of a game, and then I would want something that is grimdark. I wouldn't want dark fantasy in that setting, because then it'd be like, oh well, you're just a downer. You know, you're just like, if you really want to play like a hyper edgelord evil character, like you want to be in a grimdark setting, because that is the setting for you. If you want to play as like a murder hobo, a grimdark setting is the place for you to just do that. To just, I'm just gonna go wild. Oh, this person insulted me, I'm gonna stab him in the face. And it's like, that is unreasonable and disruptive to most games. But in
if you're trying
Mork
to keep a narrative or anything,
yeah, it's like, but in Mork Borg, stab him in the face, man. Like, go for it, because the repercussions of your actions are going to be awesome.
That's amazing. Oh, this is like, this game, Mork Borg is just vibes.
Yeah.
Like, it is pure vibes. And the book does that as well. Like, the book sometimes is, some of the fonts are a little unreadable just because it's vibe.
Yeah,
vibes.
The book is an art piece. It is.
It really
there is
is.
So ink in the, there's so much black ink in this book that when you buy, you probably experienced this when you bought it. It smells, right? Like it smells like ink. Like you cannot smell paper in this book. There is so much ink. But it is truly like yeah, they really went all out on designing the look and feel of the book. The art style is all over the place. It's super eclectic. And yeah, some of the rules are impossible to read. And I think that is really funny, because if the rule was important, you would be able to read it. So those rules probably aren't that important.
If you needed it, you would just know. You'd know it all.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. I think that kind of gets to like another point about this game, which is the game relies upon common sense as the person running the game. There aren't rules for a lot of things. And so the rule of thumb is what your GM says, what is common sense. Like if you were to ask like, how many things can I carry? How much weight can I carry? There isn't a rules system per se for like, there is a rule in here of like, oh, you can carry this many regular sized items. What is a regular sized item? Like, how much does it weigh? Like that sort of thing is what the game designers, the designers of Mork Borg, their intention is that you just do what makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying, oh, if you're doing what like a Skyrim character does and you're just carrying way too much stuff, what your GM should do is just tell you no. Like, you just don't have, like, can I carry this? No, you can't. You have too much stuff. Like, you literally can't. You can't carry that. Or do you have a backpack? Like, you don't have a backpack. You don't have anywhere to carry it. Where are you carrying this?
Absolutely.
Like that's just kind of the rule of thumb, is that if it doesn't make sense, then just be like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, a lot of it seems to be like rule of cool, whatever.
Yeah, it's like it's
tone that you want to have.
Yeah, it's like we can't in any game, like, you can't have rules for absolutely every conceivable scenario.
It would be a book. It would be such a thick book if that was true. It would be impossible to go through. I think
there are games that are like super rules heavy. I think Pathfinder is a good example of that, where they have rules for absolutely everything. And you can try to do that, but I mean, Pathfinder doesn't have rules for everything, right? Like, even though it's a crunchy game. That's what I'll say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, it has a lot of crunch to it, and it still isn't a simulation, because we're not playing to play a simulation of life. We're playing to play a tabletop game. So like, you have to have a point. And I think that the base assumption of the game being like, hey, just do what makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense to you and the other people at your table, then don't do that, is like a much more useful ruling to have kind of out in the forefront as far as like, can you do this? It's like, can you jump across the chasm? Well, the chasm is about 10 feet across. So the question is it possible? Is it reasonable? Can you jump across a 10-foot chasm? Maybe. I think that that's worth a roll.
Yeah, like, and it could also be worth the player actually using environment things and their own creativity. Yeah,
there's also because there aren't proficiencies, right? Like, there aren't rules for like, oh, I have proficiency in climbing or whatever. Like, I have proficiency in I have a special ability that makes me better at animal handling. Like, those things don't exist in Mork Borg per se.
The characters are really special.
Yeah, but also it means that you are open to the creativity of like, there is nothing that says how you are supposed to handle the jump across the chasm. Mm-hmm. So therefore, potentially anyone that it makes sense to do so could try to jump across the chasm. There isn't a rule about you can only jump a number of feet equal to your strength plus whatever, right? Like, there isn't a rule for jump distance. Mm-hmm. So the rule is, does it seem like you could? Yeah. Or if your GM is like, oh, you're carrying too much stuff, you'd have to set something down and then you could try it.
Yeah, giving hard choices like that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's like, can I jump across the chasm? Well, the chasm is 30 feet. No. It's like, no. It's like, are there rules for jumping? It's like, no, there isn't. But 30 feet is just too far. Like, it's just too far.
That's a lot of feet. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to like, if you're like fighting a monster. Like, there are rules for making attacks, but there aren't rules for like grappling and how grappling works. So if you're like, I want to like attack the monster, and like your GM is like, well, you can't attack the monster because it's like holding both of your arms. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to kind of follow what makes sense, but if your player is like, well, like, how am I supposed to attack it if it's holding my arms? You as the GM can be like, well, unless you have an attack that doesn't use your arms, it just wouldn't make sense for you to do that. Mm-hmm. And then your player's like, well, I bite it. And it's like, okay, now we're talking. Now roll to attack. Like that works, right? Like, it kind of opens you up to this bit of like creativity of like, if you have this scenario where like it doesn't make sense for you to be able to do something, you have the openness to find any creative solution because there isn't a set of rules for who can and cannot bite things.
Mhm.
Um,
Anyone can bite. Anyone can bite something. Like,
but like there isn't like a rule specifically like a bite does 1 damage. Like in
yeah.
Mork Borg, like you could say it does 1 damage, or you could say it does a D4 or D2 because D2s are actually pretty common in Mork Borg. Coin flip to determine 1 or 2.
Love D2.
Yeah, and so like you could be like, oh, a bite does a D2 of damage, and maybe that's worth your time because like it could do, the monster only has 4 hit points as well, so like if you manage to get some damage on it, like any damage is good damage.
Yeah, it works, and it's cool. You just bit a monster.
yeah, and then you bit the monster. Like yeah, you can essentially adjudicate anything in Mork Borg by a D20 roll. Which is kind of what you're doing already, but because there isn't like a bunch of modifiers, you can more easily it's easier for you as the GM to determine difficulty ratings, and they even have them printed. I think it's in the back of the book. They have like a bunch of tables for like the GM. They're also in the Mork Borg GM screen that they sell. It's also, you can download the GM screen sheet in a printable version on their website.
Oh, that's so helpful.
And so you can just have all of the rules. It's like a 1-pager of all of the rules of the game.
So nice.
Yeah, and it basically outlines that like anything that is like a check of a 6 or lower is incredibly easy. A normal like skill check would be a 12, and anything that is 18 or higher is almost impossible. Like, and if it's higher than that, you might as well just like say no, right? Like if you're like, it would require a 22. It's like, that is probably not going to happen in most games of Mork Borg that someone could even roll that high. So just be like, no, just tell them no. You can't do that.
If you're gonna go that high, might as well just make it simple and just say no.
Yeah. I'm a fan of like if your DM doesn't want you to do it, like just say no. Just be like, you can't do that. That would be impossible. You can jump in the hole, but you're gonna die. So just don't do it.
Yeah, again, you can, but death.
Yeah, but fair warning, you will die.
Yeah, exactly.
100% of the time, you will die doing this. So don't.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, the characters and such in Mork Borg. The character creation in Mork Borg. Super easy, correct?
Yeah, pretty easy. There is sort of a step-by-step to it. I always like bringing up like a character sheet and then kind of just going through that to like build a character. But basically, as of like page 18. It is page 18. Page 18. Yeah, page 18 of the book is where they start talking about in a very moody way, like what the type of scum are, because everybody in Mork Borg are referred to as scum. It's sort of a thing in the community of people who play. Is like, tell me about the scum of your world. But yeah, so like, which it does kind of further emphasize, right? Like, you're not supposed to be building like a good fellow. Like, you're supposed to be building building scum. Everybody in Mork Borg is arguably human. It is not a world that has non-human characters in it, at least by default. Although, if you look at some of the humans in it, they are so interesting, let's say, that they fill archetypes of non-human characters in other settings. I think that the Fanged Deserter class is very like reminiscent of an orc type of class in most games. Yeah, but your characters are arguably human. But it also doesn't matter very much because of the nature of the world in the game. Like, any non-human creatures are going to be monsters trying to kill you, but any humans you encounter could be monsters trying to kill you too. So, like, I don't know if it super matters.
Everything's out to kill you. That's fine.
Yeah, you're going to die soon. It's fine.
But yeah, so we talked a little bit beforehand about actually kind of going through the steps of character creation, and I think that would be a great way to show people like just how easy that this game is to just pick up and play for like a one shot.
Yeah, I'm actually going to just send you a message. That is the website with the content, and if you just scroll down to the second thing, there is character sheets, and that is the printer-friendly version is the one that I'm partial to, and that is the Mork Borg character sheet. At least if you wanted to look over it. I mean, you can like scratch paper this for sure, but if you wanted to see sort of what the character sheet looks like, it is on merkborg.com/content, and they have like their rules reference and the character sheets, and a bunch of other free content, including like Scum Birther, which is literally a button click that generates a full random character.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so like if you really can't be bothered to like make a character, you can just go to the application and hit new character, and it will tell you
they
a
make
lot
it so easy.
Yeah, no, it's really easy. There's also like it's what is it? Dungeon Gen. There's no like vowels in this word. But it's like Dungeon Gen. But it essentially gives you like an outline of a dungeon for your GM to be like, that's
so cool.
Yeah, it's like, here is the location, here's what lives there, here's the treasure, here is like a couple of things that are in the dungeon. And it doesn't like give you a map or anything, but it's certainly like a very good place for like, I need to prepare a game in an hour or less. What am I doing? And it's like, well, here you go. Here is a bunch of stuff. You can just click it and play. They have a similar thing for like a monster approaches, which is like a thing that you can click on and it'll give you a random monster off of a series of like preset like properties, and it'll give you a brand new monster that way.
My favorite thing in TTRPGs is like amazing resources and stuff like that. So this is just hitting exactly what I love. Like you make everything super easy to obtain information, like just to print out like the GM screen where it gives you all the rules. They even have correct me if I'm wrong, they have a free version of the actual book that's just text?
I think so. I haven't looked into it because I just keep buying their books. But I know that the rules aren't hard to come by. I mean, they're literally all on the screen there. I don't know if they have a full... Oh, I think somebody has made that. But essentially, the creators of Mork Borg and the publishing company that makes it is Free League Publishing. And Free League publishes a number of different games. They I think they're the ones currently in charge of like the Lord of the Rings property for like I think it's the One Ring.
Yeah, One Ring, The Walking Dead. They just did like a recent Kickstarter for like The Walking Dead.
Yeah, like they're doing very well with their properties.
Alien?
They also make a game called Vaesen, which is really cool.
Yes, I love.
I like Vaesen a lot. They also, but yeah, Free League does a lot of different things. But they also do they publish Mork Borg, and Free League is, I mean, it's kind of in their name. Like they're very good about like third-party licenses, and I think Mork Borg's third-party license is probably the best third-party license ever. It is, don't be like racist, don't be sexist, don't be like transphobic. Other than that, don't say that you're us publishing your content, and you're good to go. They're like, just don't be an asshole, make fun things, and you're good to go. Like you can take the content, you can take the names of things, like you can make your own Mork Borg content. Just go. You can do that. Which has made this community of like creations essentially the like the Mork Borg cult, as the fan base is called, is what like the Mork Borg cult Ferritory is based on, is like a bunch of community created content that was then curated.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that they like curated into like this booklet. And there's just a lot of very good free content for Mork Borg because of that. So you can find all sorts of things and resources online because the game is really easy to hack and make your own content for, and the creators very much encourage that with their open license. Yeah, there's like they even have like resources for the compatible with Mork Borg logos and stuff that you can download on their website, so you can be like, this content is compatible with Mork Borg.
Perfect.
Yeah, they're like the only things that you can't do is like publish that you are like Free League Publishing or Stockholm Cartel or like one of the actual publishers. You can't claim to be them or use their logos. But other than that, Mork Borg
Which I think
is
is a
fair
pretty
game.
fair point.
Yeah, it's like literally just don't impersonate us and make fun content for the game we made.
It's perfect. Absolutely. Again, Free League is honestly probably one of my favorite publishers because of everything that they have available as resources and the community and all of that. I love it so much. But yeah, let's get into doing like the character creation and kind of going through that. If you would like to lead how you would help someone in one of your own games make a character for Mork Borg, and I've got some dice here because I know there's a good bit of rolling. We can just kind of go through the. This is the end of the first episode exploring Mork Borg. The second episode will be coming out next week on Friday, May 19th. We will be talking about actually creating a character and going through the steps of creating a character and talking even more on mechanics. So I am really, really excited for that. If you enjoyed this episode, I would greatly appreciate it if you decided to take the time out of your day to support the RPG Goblin podcast. Every little bit of support means the world to me, whether it be leaving a rating on your favorite podcast platform, following the RPG Goblin on social media, or especially telling your friends about the podcast. I really, really want this to be a resource for players to try and find new games that they will love for their table. So I would really, really appreciate any kind of support like that, and it will help keep the podcast going. So thank you. Thank you again to Zakariah for coming on and talking about Mork Borg. If you're curious in what Zakariah does, you can actually find him on DM's Guild, where he actually posts a lot of content for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A lot of the content is really, really awesome, so if you play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, please consider checking him out. You can find him just with the name Zakariah, which will be put in the description of this episode. Now, next episode, like I said, will be the second part of this Mork Borg exploration, and that will be coming out Friday, May 19th. And again, we'll be talking about character creation, actually going through those steps, and more game mechanics, because this game is absolutely wild. So if you enjoyed this episode, please consider checking out the next one when it comes out. I think that is it. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.